to you thinking that, I don't deserve to do anything for myself. That is a pain point. So here's what I like to share. I like to take the word past, PAST, and really break it down so that we can understand what it means to recognize and identify those pain points and then see how they're showing up like in our lives right here, right now. So let's do this. Let's take the letter P. The letter P in the word past, that you can't guess what that means, right? It stands for, yes, pain point. And what is a pain point? It is a challenge. It is a thorn in the side. I'm sure that all of us have heard that phrase before. Or perhaps it's this thing that just keeps messing with you. You keep thinking about it and you realize that it really is something that has made you feel uncomfortable. So I want to give you an example. So I talked about me being bullied in elementary school, middle school. I mean, I cannot tell you the number of times that I was chased home from school. And one incident in particular was not about being bullied, at least not this one. There's lots of those, but here's what makes this such a reality for me. Sixth grade, middle school, we had a book to read, and I cannot remember the name of the book, but each person was responsible for reading a paragraph in that book. And when it came time for me to read my paragraph, there was a word in there. I'm going to spell it Balcony. Now, you and I both know that that word is spelled balcony. Well, when I got ready to read my part, got to that word, and I pronounced it balcony. And can I tell you that there was such a loud laugh, and people were just, you know, uh, just laughing hard and teasing. And the louder they laughed, the smaller I felt. And I beat myself up for that because I could not believe here I am in sixth grade, and you mean to tell me that I pronounced that word incorrectly. So that was a pain point for me because I felt so small. I was so embarrassed. I cannot even tell you what it felt like to have the entire class just laughing and really looking at me and pointing and just all this kind of stuff. And you know how kids are, middle school, elementary school, just mean, right? So that was my pain point. So that's the P. Now, the A in the word past is about allowances. What is it that we allow to happen as a result of the pain point, or what don't we allow? So, what I recognize is that as I got older, even as an adult in corporate America, sitting in meetings, having conversation, knowing that I had something of value to add, but I would not open my mouth. Why? Because I would think about that sixth grade class, that little girl who pronounced the word balcony incorrectly. So, what I would do is fast forward that incident, and that would keep me from opening my mouth, even if I knew what it is I wanted to say. Even if I was comfortable that I knew the answer, I would shrink back. And the other piece of that is that if I didn't know the answer, I was too afraid to even offer any kind of communication or interjection because I didn't want someone to look at me and say, oh, no, that's not it. And then I would feel small again. So allowances, the A in the word past, is about what behavior are we exhibiting or not exhibiting as a result of that pain point. Now let's talk about the S. The S is the stronghold. Now, when I think of a stronghold, I think about emotion, right? You think about a person who perhaps comes up behind you and they're holding you tight and you can't move. That's the stronghold, right? You are secured down and you cannot move. Well, an emotion that might be associated with that is fear, right? So when I think about my pain point, sixth grade, sitting in class, being laughed at, and then as a result, my allowance, the behavior was that I wouldn't open my mouth to speak. Well, the S, the stronghold, that emotion was about feeling intimidated, feeling embarrassed, feeling like I didn't have anything of value to bring to the table. So I would just shut down. That emotion, it just keeps me from being open, from bringing something to the table that is of value. So that's the S. But here's the thing, the T. Oh, the T is the best part of this formula. And here's the reason why, because the T is about transformation. Transformation. What can we do to change how that pain point has affected us? What can we do to change the behaviors that are associated with things that have happened to us maybe yesterday, last week, last year, 5 years, 10, 15, 20 years ago? There is always an opportunity for transformation. And this is the part that I like the most. And I want to share just a few quick things that can really help us figure out, okay, now that I've identified what these pain points are, and I know the behaviors that I have exhibited as a result, and I also know the emotions associated with it, how can I transform them into something that is going to help me create this amazing future that I've been talking about? Now, let me say this. I do want to provide a disclaimer, because while I'm sharing this information, I'm giving you this formula about the past and how you can apply it to your life. I do recognize that each and every one of us have a series of challenges that vary on different levels. And some of those are pretty traumatic. And so you may recognize that while this formula sounds like it's something easy to apply, perhaps your pain points require a little bit more. And so if you're the person who feels like perhaps there's an opportunity or a need to seek additional help for those pain points, then by all means do that for you. It is absolutely healthy to do that. So I just wanted to throw that in there because someone may just need that. So let me share this. I think about turning those pain points into possibilities. Here's the first thing that I would share, and that is reframing what that pain point does to us and how it impacts us. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes when we think about the challenges, when we think about the things that have bothered us, the things that have caused us to go in an emotional tailspin, sometimes we look at that as a debilitating factor. But my suggestion is to reframe the pain point so that it's not a debilitating gesture or part of who we are, but it's more about a deliverance factor, meaning that, we all have stuff. We all have things that God knows we would much rather forget, conversations, experiences, all of that. And the reality of it is, those are the things that, yes, are part of our history, but they do not have to dictate our future. So when we begin to reframe that pain point, what it says is we just accept the fact that these are things that have happened to us, but they've happened for us. And more importantly, everything that we go through is something that can be used not just for our growth, but to help someone else along the way. So when we reframe it to think of it that way, then it kind of takes the power away from the pain, the challenge, the hurt, the regret. Like, we could go down the list and we could identify all of those emotions associated with the pain point, but reframing it and accepting the fact that, you know what, yeah, it was a part of my history, but here's how I'm going to use it to turn things around. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would suggest is that define what it is you desire. Now, I know you're probably saying, okay, all right, so what do I desire? How does that fit in? How does that connect with this thing called a pain point? Well, the reality of it is, if we think about what we desire, more than likely, it is going to be the opposite of the behavior and the emotion associated with that pain point. And here's how that works. So I shared with you about bullying. I shared with you about my experience in the 6th grade, mispronouncing that word. So what I would say is the stronghold, the emotion associated with that was that I was feeling intimidated. I was feeling embarrassed about a lot of different things. And I might not have said it to anyone. And if someone was looking at me, they probably wouldn't even know. But on the inside, that's what I was feeling. So, what I desire is to be able to stand firm, to stand strong in who I am, to know that if I open my mouth, that I can speak something that is meaningful and of value. So that's what I desire. So, whatever your pain point is, think about the opposite. What is it that you would like to experience rather than what you did experience in the painful, challenging moment? So, that's the second step. What do you desire? So, the next thing is that once you figure out, okay, now I reframe this pain point. I'm thinking of it as a part of my history. It doesn't have to dictate my future. Now I've identified what it is that I actually desire. Who is it that I choose to be in spite of what may have happened to me before, yesterday, last week, last year? The next step is to begin to think about that in your mind. Think about what does it mean to stand in my power, to be strong, to be bold, to be confident. Now you fill in the adjectives that describe your pain point and what you desire as a result of it. But once you think about it in your mind, now you're starting to give that reframing of it a little bit more shape, a little bit more character. So think about, what does it mean? What does it look like to own who I am, to own the notion of having, yes, that amazing future? Here's the next step. Once you reframe it, once you think about it in your mind, then here is the thing that is just as powerful. It is speaking it out of your mouth. That little sixth grade girl would be saying things like, you know what? I can't say anything that anybody would want to hear. I'm not even going to bother. I'm not going to open my mouth. You know what? Every time I say something, it's just not the right thing. So I'm not going to say anything. That's speaking out of my mouth what that little sixth grade girl would have said as a result of that pain point, mispronouncing that word balcony incorrectly. However, when you reframe the pain point, then the language that comes out of your mouth starts to sound something like this. You know what? Yes, I do have something of value to say. And I do have something that people will want to listen to. You know what? I may not always be right, and that's okay. I'm confident enough to engage in conversation and know that no matter whether or not I'm right or wrong or indifferent, it is okay because my voice is strong and powerful enough to make a difference. See, that's speaking it out of your mouth, which is the opposite effect of what I would have said and what I did say years later after that sixth grade incident. So that is speaking something different out of your mouth to help shape that future. Words mean a lot. Words have power. So when we put them out into the atmosphere, they do begin to have life. So you and I get to choose how we speak that. Okay. So the last thing that I would suggest is that once you reframe that pain point, once you've said, okay, this is what I desire, the opposite of the thing that gave you the challenge. And here's how I'm going to think about it. And then I'm going to begin to speak it so it aligns with my thoughts and my desires. The very last step to transform, to shift, to move that pain point into possibility is to then take the action that aligns with that desire, that aligns with those thoughts, that aligns with the words that you're speaking. Because when you take the action, then that means you're opening yourself up to, yes, you're amazing. So, what does taking action look like from that pain point that I described to you? Yes, going back to the sixth grader sitting in class, speaking that word incorrectly, balcony instead of balcony. But what does that look like to now move that into someone who is imagining herself opening her mouth, speaking powerfully, and being able to share something of value? Well, that means that that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm connecting with people who can help me to use my voice. I'm connecting with people who are opening up to say, hey, listen, yes, what you have to say is valuable. And yes, I'm actually feeling the release of those emotions, not embarrassed if I happen to say something that's incorrect, but feeling like, you know what, it's okay. So I'm taking the action that lines up with my desire, with what I'm thinking, with what I'm speaking. And when we take the action, that's when we get to move into amazing, joyful, fulfilled, exciting. You know, there's so much that when we think about incidents from our past, we just don't recognize how much they influence us, influence our behavior, influence how we feel, how we speak, how we connect with other people, or sometimes how we're disconnected from other people. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've wanted to share information and I've wanted to offer suggestions and ideas, but as a result of that incident, I know for sure that I cut myself down from being able to show up. So, what I'm saying to you is that you get to define what your pain point is. Once you know it, once you call it out for what it is, then you know how to deal with it. I'm suggesting taking it through this exercise of identifying the pain point, recognizing the behavior, the allowance that you've exhibited, identifying those emotions that are connected to it, and then figuring out how do I transform this so that I can create my amazing. So really quickly, recapping as we bring this to a close, reframe that pain point. Recognize that yes, it is a part of my history, but it does not have to dictate my future. Define what you desire, the opposite of that pain point. Think about what that looks like. Begin to speak it from your mouth, and then take the actions that line up with what you desire, what you're thinking, and what you're speaking. So you get to create an amazing new future. And yes, an amazing new you when you shift those pain points and look at all the possibilities available to you so that you can be the best, that you can live your best, and most importantly, so that you can share everything that you learn with those around you, because you get to touch your world to create amazing for you and everyone else connected to you. So I'm Erica Salee. There's so much that I'd like to get into, but I know that if you want to find out more information, then you can reach me at truesynergy@comcast.net or visit me on the web at www.truesynergy.org. I am your True Transformation Success Coach, and I look forward to connecting with you real soon.
Jackson, and I am so happy to be here with you all today. I am here to talk about what so many people may be dealing with, especially women, and that is shame and how to overcome it. How to overcome shame is something that so many of us have a hard time doing. There's shame in our personal lives. There's shame maybe even in some things that might have happened to you when you were younger, some things even up into your a teenager and adult life. And a lot of us are holding those things in, and we need to release them. And I want to tell you today how to overcome shame. That's something I had to learn in my life, and that was to overcome shame. If I was ashamed, I wouldn't be able to be here right now talking to you, doing this live video, telling you how I was able to overcome shame of some things that have happened to me as a little girl all the way up to adulthood, things that were consciously done by myself, decisions that I made, and some things that were unconsciously done to me as a child, but I was able to overcome, and here we are today. And I'm so glad to be a part of the Women's Success Conference this year as a digital facilitator. So listen, let's get right to it. So first of all, let's talk about what is shame. Shame, according to the Webster Dictionary, it can be two ways. It's a noun and also it's a verb. The dictionary says it's a painful feeling of humiliation and distress. Wow. And when I read that, I said, wow, it sure is painful. That is the truth. It's caused by consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. So, and then when I read that, I said, wow, some people actually bring shame on themselves by the decisions that they make. How many of you all listening today or tonight could wonder sometimes why you go through some things? Sometimes it's like my dad always says, self-inflicted wounds. And those things always cause sometimes shame. And then there's also a person, a verb meaning of it is a person, action, or situation that makes someone feel ashamed. So that could be somebody trying to embarrass you or down you or put you down or just say evil things about you or just try to do some type of action that makes you feel or be ashamed. But I'm here today as your digital facilitator, Chantel Jackson, here at the Women's Success Conference to let you know that you don't have to be ashamed about anything or ashamed about anything, that you can actually make it through the things that you've been through. I want to just get a little transparent today and tell you a little bit about my personal story and how I got here. Well, first of all, I have an acronym that God, I do serve a higher power. His name is God. And he gave me this, and I just wanted to share it with you. Shame, situations, happenings, altering, magnificent endings. Let me go over that one more time. Situations and or happenings, altering, magnificent endings. Now, you might say, well, think about that. And that's shame. S is for the situations. H is for happenings. A is for altering. M is for magnificent. E is for endings. Shame. That is what that word or that emotion or that can do to you if you don't get a hold of it and begin to learn how to overcome shame. So let's dive right into it. Situations. Many times we go through things, decisions that we make, sometimes things that we're not aware of. For instance, a lot of us may be watching right now have dealt with some things that we don't like to talk about, and one is molestation. Molestation is something that happens to lots of children. It's happening, as you have been probably watching in the news, the Me Too movement. A lot of women are coming forward talking about the things that have happened to them, have been perpetrated upon them via a male counterpart. And don't get me wrong, guys get molested too by women, but for the most part, you hear there's men perpetrating this on women, and they grow up to be women who are ashamed. How do I know this? Because I was that woman. I was that woman that was molested by a family member from the time I was 4 years old to about my teenage years. And it caused a lot of shame to come upon me to the point where I developed different habits that were not something that I would like to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it today because guess what? I have overcome shame. And I want to help you today overcome shame of maybe being molested. So anyway, this was perpetrated on me by a family member who was in authority. He was a pastor. And a lot of you may be watching today. And I told myself I would tell this story one day and I will be able to help. And I believe that I will be able to help somebody that might be sitting there watching, knowing that this may have happened to them. And how do you deal with it? So for many years, I walked around in shame, and I walked around shame of my body, shame of my sexuality. Not that I was fighting, you know, if I like men or women. I liked men, and I still do. But but it was unhealthy. Like I was looking for love in all the wrong places. And that made me jump in and out of relationships. I eventually developed a eating disorder. I was actually ballooned up to about 300, 400 pounds when it was all said and done. And that caused another sense of shame to come on me, because now I'm this young lady that has this perpetrated on. And then now I'm in a situation where I have eaten to cover the pain of being this happening to me. And I wasn't able to tell anybody because of who this person was and what it would do to maybe even our family and even me. Was I going to be hurt? Was the family going to be torn apart? Was I going to be separated from my family? All these things will come in my mind. And I was just ashamed. So you might be saying, well, how did you get through that? How are you here talking about this today? And you're not, you know, going through any kind of emotional or mind battles. But let me tell you, I was able to get through this because guess what? Number one, and I want to talk to you today, is about talking about what happened. Many times when this is perpetrated on individuals, they are ashamed to talk about it, or ashamed to tell, or they're scared to tell. That's a friend of shame. A friend of shame is fear. So these are particular things that come upon you when you have the spirit of shame. It will try to take hold of you where you fear man, and you fear that if you voice this to anybody, if you tell anybody, that you would be looked upon as a whore, you'd be looked upon as somebody that was maybe asked for it, or somebody that was, you know, fast and things like that. And you looked, you didn't want to get that person in trouble, especially if they're a person like your father or your granddad or your uncle or your cousin. But let me tell you, the way I was able to get free was I finally told someone. And the day I told someone, I'll never forget it, I felt a freedom like never before. It was no longer, I was walking around feeling dirty, feeling ashamed, that I was able to just be free. Now, was that the end of it all? No, because even after telling, you know, releasing that and letting, you know, somebody else know what happened to me, it was still questions asked, you know, that made you feel even more ashamed. So I just wanted to encourage somebody today to don't hold that in any longer. Even if it's been years and you've never told anybody, it might have happened to you when you were a little girl. I was 16, 17 when I finally told somebody, but it was happening all the time. So even if you're a woman watching today and you feel ashamed about what has happened to you, it was perpetrated on you, something like molestation. It could be anything. I'm using molestation as a example on today because that's something that was very detrimental that happened to me as a child. And a lot of women I know are going through this, and even sexual harassment and things like that because the Me Too movement, and they're coming out and they're, you know, finally speaking up. And as you can see, as other women begin to speak up, they begin to open the door, like a freedom. Like it was like a freedom, like freeing the slaves almost. Like people would just begin to run and say, it happened to me, it happened to me. It was a freeing agent because they finally voiced what happened to them. So I encourage you to do that today. Also, you know, take ownership of, you know, the responsibility of you telling, you know, don't take ownership necessarily of what happened to you. Well, you can do that too. You can say, well, you can address it and say, this happened to me and I'm not going to hurt anymore. That's what I mean by taking ownership. And so that's what I did. I said, well, it happened to me. It was perpetrated on for me. Now you have to, what do you do after that? You forgive. How do you forgive someone that does something so cruel and so heartless and just so perverted and nasty? You forgive them by, first of all, it takes the grace of God. You can't do that without a higher power or, you know, God himself, you know, giving you the grace and the strength to do it. So I was able to forgive the perpetrator, even though it was a family member. He's since passed on. But I don't even hurt anymore when I think about it. It was the times I used to think about it. I have my own 3 children. It was times I would watch them like a hawk, like I wouldn't want them to go anywhere because, the enemy would fight me in my mind to make me just kind of play back what happened to me and imagining that happening to them. And I would just get angry. So I had to ask God to help me to forgive the perpetrator. And I did. I was able to forgive him. And let me tell you something, I seeked out professional help. A lot of us sit around, especially in our community, if you're African American, we sit around and we don't get help. We cover things up and we don't necessarily go and get therapy. I also had a strong support system with my church home, and I was able to get help there. And also I was able to, like I said, acquire therapy, sit down, talk to somebody, cry about it, get angry about it, and release it. So those are some ways, that you can get rid of shame. And shame is just something that, like I said in the dictionary, it's a noun, it's a feeling, it's a humiliation and a distress. And that's not how we want to live our lives. We want to be able to get past some of the things that happen to us. The one thing I hate when people will say, get over it, and they might not ever have this perpetrated to them. I'm not telling you to get over it. I'm telling you to get through it, because you can get through it better than you can get over. A lot of people, when they say get over it, I believe they're saying, well, forget about it. It didn't happen, and kind of try to downplay what has happened. But if you can get through it and be able to tell your story without hurting anymore, then you know that you have conquered that thing and no longer ashamed. And so as I spoke before, I grew up, with that shame, and it caused other things to happen, down bad decisions that I made. And also, like I said, I became, eating became my comfort. And so I began to eat myself into happiness, so to speak. And so with that being said, I blew up to about 400 pounds at my highest weight. And so walking around and growing up as a heavy child, heavy teenager, even into adulthood, that also brought a sense of shame on as well. And so how did I overcome that? Once again, I took the steps that I just told you. I looked at this situation. I said, look, it's not going to get any better until I decide to make a change and to take ownership of the situation that yes, this happened to me as a child, but I don't have to let it ruin me as an adult. So I began to just, think about, I was starting to have children, got married, started to have children. And I just began to think about my children, how I wanted them to see me, and how I wanted the people that, their new friends and things that they were, as they were getting older, how do I want their friends to see me? How did I want to see myself? And I also, not let alone your health. And so anyway, I began to take ownership of what had happened to me in the past, and even now that I had this eating disorder and there's overeating, it wasn't really like bulimia or the other one, anorexia. I was actually an overeater, and I used food. It was addiction to food. That's what I was diagnosed with. And I would eat food to comfort and kill the pain. A lot of you may be using other things, maybe, illicit sex. Maybe you're using, substance like alcohol or drugs to damper the pain. But that's only a Band-Aid, sweetie. You have to get help. You have to go. You have to say, look, I can't move on like this. I have to make a change. Now, so that's what I did. I ended up going and making that change back almost 19 years ago, and I lost 284 pounds. And I'm not saying that today for you to look at me and say, oh, wow, that's great. I'm letting you know that this one decision to not let that enemy, to not let that haunt me any longer, I was able to acquire and do some things that I never done as an obese young lady, as a heavy set young lady. Just getting on an airplane was a struggle, and being able to buckle my seatbelt without having the extra loop on the airplane, being able to sit inside of a roller coaster ride. These are the things that used to happen to me when I would go as a heavy young lady. I would go to the airport, and I'll get on the plane, and I was also always ashamed to get and sit down because I had to sit there and have the extra seat belt, the one that they used to demonstrate with. They used to hand that to me at the end. Now, you might say, wow, that's embarrassing, but that's what shame is. It's an embarrassing, humiliating situation. But what if I would just sit there and say, oh, woe is me. Oh, this will never change. This will be always what it is. No, you have the power to go and make your life different than what it is today. So I encourage you today to whatever has happened to you, whatever has transpired in your life, whatever is transpiring in your life today, you have the ability to make the change in your life and get rid of shame and overcome shame. So some of the steps that, like I said before, that we use to overcome shame that I've used that personally helped me, number one, is owning up to what has happened and accepting it and moving forward. And not necessarily saying,